Every Friday we talk to Luke DeCock of the News and Observer. This is a Friday. See no reason why we shouldn't talk to Luke DeCock. Plus, I'm sure he has thoughts on the Queen passing. So I found out today that Balmoral is in Scotland, which technically is also outside London, so I was right, even though I just called it outside London. Thoughts on Queen Elizabeth II's passing after a 70-year run as Queen?
Sure. One, I'm married to a dual British subject, so this is
look
a
at
moment
that.
of great despair in the household.
Okay.
When my wife finally it's a long story, but obtained her British citizenship some years ago, she actually invited the Queen to the party that we had at our old house. She did not come, but that would have been quite amazing if she had.
Right.
So I guess I'm a little bitter toward the Queen because of that, her standing us up like that. But no, I guess I don't have anything to add that hasn't been
That's
said.
fine.
I will say, I think Charles is making a huge mistake going by Charles III when George VII would have been a callback to his grandfather and great-grandfather and established himself in the line of the monarchy, whereas the other two Charleses were both bozos. So maybe that's better. Maybe
he's just trying to remake Charles in his own image. I appreciate you having takes on the new king. But you, as you mentioned, inviting the Queen to the party. When I was 13 or about to be 13 and I was about to be bar mitzvahed, I did invite Richard Todd, then quarterback of the New York Jets, Lee Mazzilli, then center fielder for the New York Mets, and Warner Wolf, all to my bar mitzvah. Richard Todd sent back a handwritten reply that he would be practicing at the time, so could not make it. And I did get a meet and greet with Richard Todd. We showed him, because we framed it, we showed him the whole thing. And he came over to the stands. We had season tickets to the Jets. He came over to the stands, shook my hand, talked to me and my dad for about 2 minutes, and then went back and beat the Vikings. So there you go.
Are we just naming guys now? Al Toon, Mark Gastineau,
No. That's why
Jets of yesteryear. No, I know, but you went through you're going through the all-time greats of the Jets, the Mets, and New York sports TV. It was very nice that you had got to share that moment with Richard Todd.
Oh my gosh! All right,
I'm very happy for you.
I know you've written about it a bunch this week. Really both wins that were more escapes than wins. Like, no fan base really should be all that great this weekend. It felt all that great coming out of last weekend. App State blew a game, gave up 63 points, really 56, but still. East Carolina should have won the game twice, or at least tied the game and then won the game. And then both the big boys managed to win, but there were some warts that really shone. So let's start with the Wolfpack. What did we learn that might be troubling about the Wolfpack?
I think probably it means the Wolfpack was getting high on its own supply a little bit over the summer. To get up 21-7 at the half and kind of fold, quite honestly, in a couple ways, sort of suggests a team that thought it had done enough, that it was done for the day. That said, if NC State punches in the ball in either of those goal line stands that it screwed up, this is a completely different conversation. And I think when you look at all four schools, the way everybody is sort of disgruntled about being 2-0 or 1-0 or nearly pulling off a couple upsets at home in the case of the other two schools, I think it's a sign of progress in some ways. I mean, nobody's happy with the way things have gone. That's a sign of higher standards for football in this state than we've had lately. I mean, I think there's a period of time where even a narrow escape at East Carolina or App State, the ACC team in question, would walk away feeling pretty good, and no one does. Now, some of that has to do with the manner of these two games for sure, but I also think the fact that neither NC State nor UNC is particularly happy about where it is, and certainly their fans are not, suggests that these teams do have bigger goals ahead, and they haven't really done any actual damage yet, other than maybe to their own resolve and the lifespans of their fan bases. But overall, I mean, that's kind of why I wrote what I wrote today, which is, these are normally these games against Charleston Southern or, UNC continuing its road tour of the Sun Belt for some reason at Georgia State. these games are usually kind of meaningless, and we just kind of get them over with to move on to the good ones. In this case, they're important and they're well-timed because both of these teams need a fresh start. And both of these teams should win these games by 20-plus points and feel very good about things. And we'll see. You disagree already.
I don't think North Carolina's winning that game by 20-plus points because I think Georgia State is good offensively. They didn't show it at South Carolina, but I think they're good offensively. The State game to me is a practice, and you need practice. So good, they're practice. A live practice can be useful. I'm not going to take anything out of the game. North Carolina, I will take something out because I think they're playing a legitimate opponent on the road. Again, why they're playing this game on the road, I don't know who owes what to somebody. But I think we got to find something positive out of North Carolina's defense. I mean, App State to score 6 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I can't. How do I make sense of that?
I was under the impression when UNC was bringing back a former defensive coordinator, it was Gene Chizik and not Vic Koenning. I was apparently misinformed. Gene, look. There's nobody in the business better at making chicken salad than Gene Chizik. He is the Bobby Flay, Alton Brown, barefoot Contessa of making chicken salad with a defensive whatever. So I think UNC is eventually going to be fine because they're going to be schemed up eventually. The fact that they look like this in week 3, week 2.1, or what I lost track with week 0.6 and all this stuff.
I hate week 0.
Week 0 is brutal. It suggests that there are deep-seated problems with the functionality of that personnel that they've assembled on defense, because it doesn't seem to matter who's coaching it. They can't get their assignments right or tackle or do any of these things we call fundamentals or used to when I was a kid. That is the oldest I've ever sounded. They should.
It probably isn't, but that's fine.
Thank you. But I do think eventually Gene Chizik will be able to get the best out of this North Carolina defense, whatever that is. And I don't think there's any doubt that what we saw against Florida A&M, although the kid Jeremy Musa could sling it. I mean, the kid could sling it. Or at what we saw against App State. I don't think that's the finished final product of the UNC defense. It can't be. Well, I'm just saying.
They gave up 61 points to App.
There's not going to be a direct line from there to whatever this ends up being. I mean, if it is, then shut it all down and burn it all down and whatever.
Yeah, to me, they were soft at the point of attack against A&M, and they weren't much better. I mean, arguably, they certainly weren't much better against App. I think this game matters, and we're not that far away from a real big boy, line of scrimmage test when they get Notre Dame. Let me ask you about Sam Hartman's return for Wake Forest as they're going to Vanderbilt. Now, they're a big favorite. They're 2-touchdown favorite at Vandy. I think that this, in a roundabout way, Sam Hartman's return, as long as he's healthy enough to stick out the whole season, I have no reason to believe he isn't. But he had, when you're away from the team for 3 or 4 weeks, certainly you can think about things differently. I think it's trouble for everybody else in the Atlantic, maybe not named Clemson.
Yeah, I think so. I do enjoy the sort of ACC history and tradition of Sam Hartman's indefinite absence being one game. The ACC standard for indefinite being a single game, of course.
Solid.
I think, look, Wake was a 10-something point favorite even before the whispers about Hartman coming back broke. I don't think Wake would be bringing him back in this situation unless he were ready to go and fully healthy. So I don't have any concerns there. Yeah, I think in the long term, everybody in the Atlantic Division was hoping Sam Hartman, nothing against the kid, would stay out until after they had played him. And the ideal scenario was for Sam Hartman's last game of his indefinite absence to be the game you played Wake, and then ideally he would come back the next week against Clemson or whoever and play against them. The Atlantic Division is going to be tight. Look, Florida State's going to be in there. I really believe that. I believe that they may not win the division, but they have the potential to mess it up for somebody.
Sure.
We always underestimate Wake. State, despite the East Carolina game, still has everything in front of them. And Clemson is Clemson, although it's going to be interesting to see who's playing quarterback by about the second quarter of their next game. So it is interesting, but it's also kind of what we were expecting in July and August before the news of Hartman's sort of, I guess you'd almost call this sort of a genetic injury based on his history with sort of things in his shoulder and tumors and whatnot. Before the news of that broke, we expected Wake to be in that position. So I don't know that this changes a whole ton. I mean, I'm sure VMI is glad they didn't have to face Sam Hartman, not that it made any kind of a difference.
34 points is 34 points.
Yeah. And
would have been 54 if Hartman played, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and Mitch Griffiths is good. Like, I don't know that Sam Hartman was going to do a lot more than Mitch Griffiths did. No. I'm sure Vanderbilt would much rather prepare for Griffiths than Hartman, and that's probably changed things up at practice a little bit this week. But, it's. I don't think it dramatically changes the nature of the Atlantic Division. They are, in the words of Dennis Green, who we thought they were.
All right, Duke, before we get to the surprise PTO signing of Calvin DeHaan today, Duke at Northwestern, is this reality, or did we see enough from Duke against the bad Temple team to think, you know what, this Blue Devil team might be a little different?
I think there's what I saw against Temple. Let's put aside the X's and O's, because look, Temple was Duke very rarely wins the getting off the bus challenge, and they absolutely looked like they were in a different division than Temple. Just not a very athletic, big, strong, imposing Temple group. If it had been Campbell, and I wouldn't have batted an eye. Nothing against Campbell, but you just expect more from a team in the American. So Duke should have dominated physically and did. I think what we saw from Duke was confidence and a fresh start and players with optimism. And look, I was a huge defender of David Cutcliffe. I think people still don't appreciate what he did with that program. But by the same token, there's no question that even by the start of last season, everybody was kind of beat down. Yep. And certainly by the middle of last season, everybody was absolutely beat down. Now, before that all happened, they still beat Northwestern. So Northwestern, like Temple, is one of the teams that Duke has historically, we'll see what happens this year, historically been able to out-athlete. And so there's a chance there, I think, for this Duke team to take some confidence into a game where they're not going to be physically outmanned and win on the road. I wouldn't say it's a lock, but I think Duke has probably a better chance than people are giving them just because of the emotional boost of having some good vibes. It's been so long, years now, since there were legitimate good vibes in the Duke program. That's not anybody's fault. I'm not blaming David Cutcliffe for that. It's just the way it happened. And Lord knows the 1-year reign of error of Chase Bryce didn't help anything. But in the end, this is a different Duke team in the sense that people are more excited. And that's not a criticism of anybody. It just comes with a change in faces on the staff, in the locker room, transfers, all that stuff. And then you take the good feelings of doing what Duke did to Temple, which is really crush Temple. Could have been much worse.
Yeah.
And take that on the road to Northwestern and see what happens.
Look, ACC teams on the road in non-conference games against Power 5 opponents, it's cake. Absolute money. All right, real quick before we have to say goodbye. Hurricanes, a professional tryout for Calvin DeHaan, left defenseman, familiar. He was part of, I'm just saying this for everybody else, you know this, part of the defensive core that led the Hurricanes back to the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Really helped bail them out of the first couple of rounds of the playoffs when Trevor Van Riemsdyk got hurt and Dougie Hamilton was kind of on defensive walkabout. Thoughts on that and what it means for this roster?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get too worked up about PTOs. I mean, I think it's good to bring a guy into camp. A lot of times, like Derek Steppen, it's guys who haven't found a contract somewhere else. And this is a comfort situation for them where they know where they are. They know the coaching staff. They'll get to play in a few preseason games, presumably, maybe show off their wares for someone else. I mean, I don't know that there's a space on this roster, especially after the Stastny signing, for Derek Steppen, as much as I really like I think he's a terrific guy. I'd hire him as an assistant coach tomorrow if you were done playing. Same thing with Calvin DeHaan. Another great guy, knows the coaching staff. You'd hire him as a coach or a scout or a development guy in a heartbeat. Brewmaster if you were starting your own team brewery. But I wouldn't, I don't know necessarily that there's going to be a place for him on the roster, with the caveat that if they decide that Jake Gardner can't hack it, and we kind of have gone into this hoping Jake Gardner can play again, there's that kind of one spot on the left side of the D defensively, depth-wise, that maybe Calvin Hahn ends up there instead of Jake Gardner, and Jake Gardner ends up getting traded or on LTIR if he can't, physically play, whatever. So I think there's probably more space on this roster for Calvin DeHaan than there is for Derek Stepan, who's the other sort of notable PTO. But he's a likable guy. People, he fits in well with the team. He's not going to cause a ruckus. He's going to come in, trying to make the team, maybe get a look somewhere else. Maybe he ends up signing in Chicago and coming up here if you need him. It doesn't hurt anything. And that's kind of one of the things about waiting till later in the summer. Same thing with the Stastny signing. There are going to be guys available who might be good fits for you that you wouldn't give money on July 1st, and you might not give money on September 1st. But you want him in camp, and I think Calvin DeHaan certainly fits that bill.
I think both DeHaan and Stepan will be in the opening night lineup. Luke DeCock, I appreciate your time as always. Where are you?
We're getting money on that, buddy.
That's fine.
We're getting money on that.
Where are you? Look, Andre Kasha is only 5 minutes away from the next injury. Where are you headed this weekend?
I'm headed only to Charlotte on Sunday for the Baker Mayfield Spectacular.
Oh, should be.
Apparently, Adam, I don't know if you knew this. This is maybe breaking news. Baker Mayfield would like to beat the former team that traded him away and in his first game for his new team. This is apparently scandalous in the NFL. I had no idea.
I'm going to write that. Oh, they're breaking news. I'm going to write that down. All right, let me ask you this question before you go. If I handed you a Great Lakes beer, an Elliott Ness, an Amber Lager, an Edmund Fitzgerald, a porter, and I handed you any one of the Juicy Sycamores, Mountain Candy, or anything like that, which would you prefer?
I'm not a Sycamore fan per se.
I love Sycamore.
So I would go with the Great Lakes. But in any conversation, I will have to take the Spotted Cow that I'm holding up on your webcam right now.
Is that a Charlotte beer?
That's a Wisconsin beer.
It's a Wisconsin beer.
It's definitely a
Wisconsin
Midwest
stuff.
Okay.
So when the Panthers play the Packers and we have this conversation.
Okay. I'll save it for that. I'll save it for that.
All
right, man.
Have it sitting right here.
You got to take the train, by the way, because we can do that. We can take the train to the football game. Thanks, man. Luke DeCock.